It's Tuesday, and it's time for Falcon Focus. Welcome to this week's edition of Falcon Focus, our final edition here in the 2021-22 school year, episode number 24 here in season number 3, and our 12th episode here in semester number 2. My name is Matt Menzel, and throughout this next half hour, being joined by the Director of Athletics, Dr. Rob Barnhill. And first of all, thanks for your time here on this Tuesday, and I'm excited to see you without a mask on. I think last time we did this, we were adjusting the masks and going through all the COVID that was last season, but you look outside of maybe a couple of hiccups here this school year, are we finally, from an athletics standpoint, somewhat back to normal?
Somewhat. I don't think it's realistic to believe that we were going to overcome that mess in one calendar year. We've come a long way. Many thanks to a lot of people to have gotten us to this point, and I think it's important that I recognize the outstanding job that our sports medicine staff did in conjunction with all of the health services people on our campus, including some of our pharmacy faculty, all of the staff in our health center, and then the beyond commendable job that our athletic training staff has done to keep the kids safe and to keep us able to play. And then, you know, it's not talked about a lot, but our coaches did a great job in keeping the kids engaged. And what's talked about even less is probably the resiliency of the kids and how they stayed with it, they stuck with it, they kept training, they kept working. They just wanted to play, and they played, and they played well. So, have we completely gone away from it? No, I don't know that we ever will. I mean, I think it's always going to be a part of this in some way, shape, or form, but we've come a long way, and I feel a lot better now than I did a year ago sitting here with you.
When you reflect back on the last couple of years, what words come to mind? Because I know for me, it still seems kind of surreal that was real, that was life for a couple of years, not knowing if or when sports might return.
It's almost apocalyptic when I look back on it. I remember being in a meeting talking about whether or not we should let our baseball and softball teams and others go on their spring break trips. And as we're having the meeting, I have my phone on and I'm looking at different websites, and you see every Division I conference dropping and dropping and dropping. And I would update the people in the room. The ACC just canceled. The Big Ten just canceled, And so it was really surreal to sit in that room and realize, what are we doing, right? I mean, we're canceling all these things for this thing that no one knew about. It was almost in some ways out of a 70s, late 70s, and you're not young enough or old enough to understand it, but it's in some ways it was like a 70s sci-fi film that this thing came to Earth and sent us in this tailspin. So I look back on that in the beginning of it, and then to be honest, Matt, we had so many conversations, COVID conversations, that it all gets lumped into this one thought of COVID. And I have a hard time in my own mind. When did we play football? Right, I know we played in the fall. Did we play in the spring the year before?
Ended up this past year in the spring,
in the
2021.
And so I'm trying to keep all that in my head, and it just runs together. It just happened, and I don't. It's been a blur, and I guess if you ask me for a word, that would be it. A blur. I don't. It's just been bizarre, and we all had to deal with it, right? It's been this one prolonged COVID conversation that we all struggled to deal with and address that started in that one conference room and out in the country, but found us in this conference. Yeah, so it's been a roller coaster dealing with this stuff.
When you bring up blur and you bring up football last spring of 2021, and man, every sport essentially played in about a 4-month span in 2021.
I remember posting a tweet, okay, here we go. We're going to try to get 30 sports done in 4 months. Ready to go.
So for you as an athletic director, when you look back at those 2 years, what was maybe the most challenging aspect of that time span?
Constant meetings. Constant meetings that change minute by minute. You'd be in a meeting, you'd have an hour conversation, and 15 minutes after that, you would change everything that you did in the hour.
Jeez.
just because that's how the world was changing. It was happening that fast in real time, and you would have, almost daily meetings, and then they kind of subsided to weekly meetings, and now we're down to bi-monthly or whatever 2 times a month is. I think that's bi-monthly, but whatever, bi-weekly, whatever that is. But we would do that. But now we're down to 2 weeks, and it's not really COVID related, but that's still part of it. It's nothing anyone. They're like, I went to graduate school. Most people went to school, and there's no chapter in anything to prepare you for that. Really, pandemic. Okay, all right. So, like I said, it's like something out of a movie, and we ought to deal with it. And I think we've all come out better and stronger because of it, minus the families that were impacted. I read something today that almost 1 million United States citizens lost their life to COVID. So it's a very real thing. You take the sports thing; it doesn't really matter. It's inconsequential when you look at it that way. But in terms of the cost of human life, but I think as a country, we probably come out of it, and as an athletic department here locally, I know we've come out of it, and we're probably a little stronger because of it. I think there are changes that have come out of the pandemic that will be a part of our life moving forward for a long, long time.
When you look at, from an athletic standpoint, expectations, and I know during COVID, every school probably lenient on the expectations because, again, you're trying to navigate through a pandemic. As we start to get back to somewhat normal, is it again expected for these teams here on this campus, top 3 finish? When you look at roster numbers, a certain number, is that you getting back to that focus again?
Yeah, and I think leniency is a good word. Understanding is another way to say the same thing. We were all understanding that we had this difficult challenge, right? The kids were being challenged, the parents were being challenged, the coaches were being challenged. We had this huge challenge, and we were all being understanding of what that might look like. Okay, now this past year, I expected us to rebound because we did a great job in the spring. I expected us to rebound and be a little better. I would tell you that period of understanding or that period of leniency is at least from my chair, is probably approaching its expiration date. And I really want next fall for us to be back at 100%, meeting our expectations.
Sure.
I don't know that it's realistic to think we're going to bat 1,000, right? But I want that to again be our goal. I've made some notes for our spring meeting. That's one of the things I want to talk about. Okay, look, we're gonna view this as in our rearview mirror now, and so now moving forward, all the expectations that we had in the past are now back in play, and so let's get her going.
When you say spring meeting, and we'll go back to what I was going to talk about a second ago, what does that all entail for those that maybe don't know when you say spring meeting, what that means?
So I'm not a big meet guy, and everyone does their own thing, how they do it. And I know athletic directors that meet weekly, and I know people who meet every other week, and that's great if that's what you need to do. I believe in having departmental meetings. We have 3 standard meetings. We have a fall meeting, a spring meet, or winter meeting, and a spring meeting during the overlap periods. So I'll have a fall kickoff meeting, and then we have an overlap between the fall and the winter. So we'll recap what's happening in the fall and talk about what the future looks like in the winter, and then do the same thing with the winter spring. And then we do a wrap-up meeting later in the spring, like in May, and then we try to do something fun, go bowling or, as a staff, and, do some bonding stuff that way. But really what we do, the agenda is, there's housekeeping items that we have to take care of, right? There's institutional concerns, there's conference concerns, NCAA things you just have to do. Then there are updates and changes. You go through those, and then any new business that we have on the horizon, like reiterating the fact that, hey, it's an rearview mirror kind of thing. But that's it. If we have a problem, we can adjust our meeting schedule. I can add more meetings or whatever, but by and large, those 4 meetings are our standard stock. Everybody knows we have those.
Talking about the successes of athletics here, and you look at this school year, it starts to wind down, and regardless of, the hiccups with COVID, maybe during the winter time, whatever, one thing, and we talk about this every time you're on this show, we're blessed here because regardless, it seems like just about every sport finds a way to compete. And you look at, again, this school year, maybe not the championships per se, but again, number of teams were right there battling for championships, in-tournament championship games. Again, here in the springtime, a number of champions being crowned. When you look at this school year, are you pleased so far? I mean, with all things considered, getting back somewhat to normal, that again, you have that competitiveness where the Falcons, again, are among the who's who at a number of sports. Maybe the championships aren't there yet, but you're in that conversation.
I was looking at the numbers last week, and I would be dishonest if I were to tell you I'm happy.
Sure.
I'm not. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed. But understandably so, right? So I have to couch my expectations and my enthusiasm in that bubble of, your word was leniency, my word was understanding. I have to be understanding of the fact that although I believe next fall we can say, it's behind us. I think this year there's still some lingering effects, and as such, there's some lingering understanding. And I don't think, as we sit here today, we're where we want to be or where we need to be. But that's okay, and I think it's going to be cyclical. It's very difficult to stay in the top three in every sport, in every conference every year. It's very, very difficult. We've been blessed to be able to, in majority, be able to do that. Right now, we're a little less than that, and so I want to get us back there. And so that'll be the focus of some of the stuff over the spring and summer.
A couple of sports that maybe don't get as much attention that won conference championships here in the spring. You have the dance team that brought home a conference title, but also acrobatics and tumbling won the first ever NCATA Division III championship that was out in Adrian, Michigan. How neat is it to see like a sport like acrobatics and tumbling, still relatively new, and I know it's constantly growing, but to see that sport grow and grow at a successful rate on this campus?
I think the people that we've had involved from the inception to now have done a great job. I look back on all the coaches fondly. They've all been very good. Sarah's done a great job. I think it's been fun to watch the athletes come through and be pioneers, and it's one of those things. I was part of a charter football team, so I was on the first ever football team at a university's campus. Well, that's kind of a one-shot deal. You get to do that once.
Sure.
Well, because football is well established by that point, right? The acrobatics and tumbling environment is ever changing. So even though we've been doing it for a while, we were in kind of leading edge kind of people, right? But even though we've been doing it for a while, it's still growing. So the frontier of acrobatics and tumbling is still out there. And so every recruiting class that we have had and will continue to have for the foreseeable future are still being pioneers in that sense. Someday, there will be an NCAA Division III acrobatics and tumbling national championship. But we'll always look back on this thing as our first opportunity to wade in those waters. So,
and what a fun sport to watch, too, as far as the energy level. I mean, it's second to none inside this place.
I tell people, I have friends who have daughters that are in gymnastics, and I'm like, hey, do you know anything about this? And some of them say yes, but some of them say no. And when I have them Google and look at our videos, they're blown away at the athleticism and what the kids do. So I think they're tremendous athletes. I think it's neat. It's one of the only places where an Oregon can play a Concordia.
Yeah.
Right? I'd like to say we'd compete in a lot of other things, but I don't know if that's realistic or not. But at least in acrobatics and tumbling, we can, and we have a legitimate chance of being competitive. So it's a unique thing, and I'm proud of those people. I'm happy that we have it.
Mentioned acrobatics and tumbling being one of the relatively newer sports here on campus. One sport that was announced prior to the pandemic, kind of pumped the brakes a little bit, was women's wrestling. What's the status on that sport?
So, same. We've taken a pause a little bit, and for a lot of reasons. Okay, I started the search for our head coach, so this thing was going to already be up and running by this time, right? However, that year was an Olympic year, and the majority of the women that I was focusing on to be coaches happened to still be training to try to make the U.S. Olympic team. So their availability wasn't as maybe as high as it is now. Okay, so then that was that year. They had the Olympic thing. I went through the search, and it just quite frankly couldn't find anyone. All right, so we tabled it. We'll come back. We'll do it next year. No rush. Pandemic hits. Talked about it a couple of different times to reintroduce it and reaffirm that everyone at the institution does embrace it. Presidential change. Now's not necessarily the time with a new president looming to add new things. So we're still kind of in limbo on that. Do I want to do it? Do I believe there's value in it? Absolutely. Absolutely. But is the timing right currently, like today? I don't think so. Now, could we readdress that in the fall? There are a couple of, not that this is on your list, but there's a couple, like wrestling is a thing that I want to talk about, and potentially adding a Division III ACHA men's hockey team to our roster as well. Those are two things that I have on my agenda to approach with the senior administration and see if there's validity and interest to try to get that off the ground.
Well, you mentioned looking for a women's wrestling coach. Overall, obviously it varies based on sport, but I know you've had to make a couple of coaching changes or fill some voids, and right now women's volleyball have a new interim head coach coming up in the fall. When you go about trying to fill a void, do you have like a checklist of what you're looking for in the ideal head coaching candidate?
In most of our, I'll call them traditional sports, but in most of our traditional sports, most athletic directors have in a drawer somewhere filed away what's called a short list. 2 or 3 people that you would like to consider should the eventuality ever happen. Not, I don't have that for every sport. I don't, you don't know everybody,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But for most of our traditional sports, there are people that I've identified that if and when, right? Then the second part of that is I have an idea what the ideal candidate would look like, and then he or she will fit that model, hopefully, and that's how you go about it. So you got an idea of what mission fit looks like at Concordia, what our environment looks like, what our expectations are, what our challenges, constructs and constraints, what opportunities are here for people. And, you look at their past experiences and where they've been, versus, Division I coach. I ask my students this all the time. If Urban Meyer, probably a bad example. So let's say Nick Saban. Nick Saban decides he wants to leave Alabama tomorrow. If I bring him to Concordia, will we win a national championship? And it's fun, the dialogue that you get. Absolutely. Okay. All right. You understand that when Coach Saban walks into a recruit's house, he's got free everything in his pocket.
Sure.
And with NIL, he's got free plus, right? We don't have that. So it's just a different animal. So you're looking for people that have had similar experiences and will fit with our team and obviously fit from a missional standpoint what Concordia is. And then if those people happen to be on your short list, then great.
Well, obviously it's working. You look at number of coaches here that you've had a hand in hiring. Boy, we talk about the word blessed. And so many of these programs, longevity, success. You look at the number of coaches, they're the all-time winningest coach in their respective sport here at Concordia. How key is that longevity to obtaining that goal of a top 3 finish?
I think it's important. It might even be critical. I use that in our recruiting pitches with parents, prospective student-athletes, and prospective employees, right? You judge a restaurant by the parking lot. If it's full, there's probably a reason, right? If it's empty, okay, probably a reason. I take the same analogy and look at an athletic department. If there's constant movement, that can be attributed to a couple of things. One of the things could be that they're so ultra successful that people win and they move on, or they're not, and they just keep turning people over. At our place, we've been very successful, and I think the culture of Concordia, the fact that people come here and stay for as long as they've stayed, speaks to the quality of life, both personal and professional, that someone can have here. When I'm talking to a recruit and their parents, I'm like, listen, the coach you come in to play for is probably going to be here 4 years later. Just look at our history. We haven't turned over that many. And I tell my coaches all the time, listen, if the phone rings and you have an opportunity to go to another place, I don't begrudge you of that. I would want you to stay, but I understand if you have a better opportunity for you and your family. My personal opinion, professional opinion, is that if you can get another job from here, then you probably did a really good job while you were here, and we thank you, and we'll see you down the road kind of thing. The fact that we have had the consistency, the longevity, does make it easier to sustain culture and success. And I think we have been blessed to have people come and stay and grow. Not grow as we've hired a lot of young coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those coaches aren't quite as young now. Don't tell them I said so. But they've all grown as people. Many of them have become parents, and they're grown as parents. And you see their kids. They used to be babies, and now I've got pictures in my office of when, like, Ty was 2 at running around the football field. And, he's 21, 22 years old now. A lot of the kids that I coach remember Ty being at practice in a stroller.
Sure. And
so the same thing's happening here. These young people come and they develop relationships. They have children, and then they're growing as people, as parents, as professionals. And we are the benefactor of that, or we benefit from it, right? They give us the opportunity to be successful because they're here and they do a great job. And that's the other thing. If you're still here this many years later, it's probably because you're doing all right, right? They have met our expectations. Now you're gonna have up and down, right? But they've met our expectations, and they continue to do so. And so it's easy to have people around that are having success.
Great stability here, and softball is one of those spots. Steve Crook's been here a long time, and he's the all-time winningest coach for the Falcon softball program and top 25 team here this season, which, 10 years ago, we're not talking about teams being the top 25 in softball. Throughout this season has been a top 25 program, an exciting season, won the NAC regular season championship on Sunday, and will be the number 1 seed in this week's conference tournament. When you look at that softball program, the success they've had this year, what comes to mind for you as you watch that team continue to build and grow?
I think they've overcome a lot of adversity. This has been. I was talking to a student walking in. We're getting rained on, right? Like, this is awesome, huh? She's like, no, this is terrible. Oh, yeah, this is the worst spring I can remember. Every spring is bad in the sense that you're always going to move some games around. With this, we're moving everything, right? And all the time. I think they've overcome a lot. The weather's been horrible. You're playing? No, you're not. You're playing tomorrow? No, it'll be 2 days. Nope, now we're playing. You're going to start to play, then you're not, and we're going to play, then we're going to get wet and cold. And so I think they've come a long way. I think Steve and his staff have done a tremendous job of recruiting and getting the right kids, and those kids have bought in. And Steve and his staff and those kids have created a culture of and an expectation of success. This isn't the first year we've been good, right? We've been good for a while now. Now, it may not stretch back to 10 or 15 years, but for the last handful – the kids that are going to be seniors, their recruiting class, and some of the new kids that we've added, they've really taken the next step. So I'm excited. I want to be careful. When I start getting ahead of myself, we lose. So I want to temper my enthusiasm. I want to talk to him the other day.
One game at a time.
Yeah, right. I want to talk to him about who do you think is going to host the regional. And I kept it to myself because I'll wait. First of all, let's make it. Then we'll figure that out, right? It's not like you got choices. You'll go wherever they tell you to go. So I am excited for them, and I'm looking forward to this weekend.
You brought up the weather, and as you mentioned right now, it is pouring as we speak. I mean, it's been that kind of a spring, and Catalyst Park has been used for 2 dates, 4 games total. Otherwise, the softball team, essentially the Road Warriors, and no different Sunday, they were in Glendale. Is that something that needs to be addressed in the offseason in the sense, do you look at Catalyst Park, you look at the field and go, what's going on here? Why are we having so many issues with standing water, or do you chalk it off as it's been just a bad spring, that there may not really be an issue here, but it's just been a bad, rainy springtime?
Yeah, okay, so history lesson and then current news, right? The history lesson is when we had the turf people come in, they put in 3 fields all at once, football, soccer, and the softball outfield. Okay. They did all of them, same company. Back then, 15 years ago, okay, turf technology wasn't new, but turf technology in baseball and softball for those applications was new-ish.
Okay.
So the company that did it understood how to do the outfield, the turf part of the outfield. And the same company, we hired them to do what's called a turnkey job, which means they do the job, then they give us the key, and it's over with. We don't have to mess around with individual people. We mess with them. And they general contract, and they do it. The people that we had do the infield, I don't necessarily know had the expertise to do what needed to be done. Okay. Since that time, we've made some changes. Technology's changed. The application of turf and the rules have changed. Mm-hmm. So back then, the NCAA said that you could not host a regional if you did not have what's called a skinned infield. They've changed that now, and you can have a turf infield, so it doesn't have to be organic material. Right now, I'm emailing back and forth, so I don't think I'm breaking any news here. The football stadium turf is going to be replaced this summer. Mm-hmm. Don't have a scheduled date for beginning and ending of construction. I have a drop-dead date for when it has to be completed, but they're working with me to get me a date of when they're going to be here to start it. Right now, the conversation is because of what we've experienced this spring and because of the money that we sunk into the infrastructure with the stadium and so on and so forth, we're not necessarily achieving our return on investment because the field's not enough. It doesn't drain well enough.
Sure.
This is what it is. It just doesn't drain well enough for us to use it the way we want to. So right now I'm talking with a turf company to see what would it look like if we had you come here and do that this spring as a piggyback to that other program. Now, careful. I didn't say we're going to do it this spring. I'm saying we're looking at what it would cost and can we find the money to do it this spring. If not, too long-windedly, it has to be addressed. I want to be out of the dirt business. I want to be in the turf business in softball at 100%.
Before I talk more about turf, you mentioned regional. So big picture, is the hope maybe at some point Catalyst Park will be in a position maybe to host a regional and or at some point maybe the next softball tournament? I know that's been talked about in years past that would be an alternate thing with baseball, softball, and that's kind of died since the pandemic. Is that still in the works that softball could potentially at some point down the road host a conference tournament?
I think the answer is yes, but there are some things that have to change. Lights would almost be a necessity, especially at the NCAA level. When you look at hosting regionals, I think you start with looking in the mirror. What I mean by that is I want a team that's able to compete for a regional. The NCAA baseball group approached me many years ago in San Diego about hosting a regional in Capco because of the quality of the stadium. Well, yes, I'm interested, but I want my team to be able to be in it, right? I don't want to host a bunch of other people's baseball teams. I don't want to do that, really. And so you look in the mirror first, and you hope to develop a program that can compete to get to that level, and then it makes sense for you. There's no guarantees, right? Mm-hmm. Then it makes sense for you to undertake that challenge. Do I believe we could do that out there? Yes. I think we need to add turf up 100%. We probably need to add lights to be able to get to that point. I think the object of looking in the mirror, we've established that this program, this softball program, can reasonably assume that they're going to compete for a conference championship, thus reasonably have a chance to make a regional tournament. And so then when you start talking about hosting it, there's a better chance than zero that we're going to be able to have our kids in it and that they would benefit and we would benefit and that kind of thing. So, you
mentioned new turf at Thomasini Stadium coming up in the off-season, and I think that's one thing that many maybe never really thought about back in the day when turf was still relatively new, or at least it was starting to pop up more and more, is it's not a one-time fix-all. I mean, you have to maintain that turf, and eventually new turf needs to be installed after a certain period of time. What is typically that lifespan of turf for whether it be football, softball, baseball? Is it 10 years?
It's originally the warranties were 10 years, so you could expect a 10-year life cycle, or they were 8 years, and I think we purchased an additional 2 years of warranty, and have had them come back and address things. I'm going to give you more turf information than you want. Okay, so. Yes, there's maintenance that needs to be done, but it's much less than if you have organic material. By and large, our turf maintenance is addressing any issues that arise within the turf structure itself, the turf system. All right, what does that mean? Every line in a football field that's not a yard line has to be individually glued or sewn into the turf system. So I've been to a turf manufacturing facility,
Okay.
so I've seen this. I had my hands in Finlandia's football field as it was being run on the loom, as it's being created. And I took a picture of it, and I called my buddy who was the AD at the time. I'm like, hey, I'm rubbing my hands all over your field. He said, what are you talking about? And I explained it to him. But so the way the turf comes out is there's a white line, and there's green turf, and there's a white line, and there's the yard marks. Everything else has to be hand applied.
Jeez.
Well, take a soccer field. The boxes and the circle are the only lines that need to be added. So the maintenance of that field versus the maintenance of the football field is much, much less, because the likelihood that some of those inlays, is what they're called, can come up
Okay.
is greater because there's more of them in a football field than there are in a soccer field, as opposed to a baseball field that doesn't have any inlays, unless you want them to, right? You can put graphics and stuff in there, but there are no inlays. They're all sewn in at the manufacturing plant. So there is some maintenance to it. The maintenance person for the first 7 or 8 years for our turf football field, you're looking at him. It was me. I had a Home Depot bucket with some knee pads, some glue, right, and a bucket of rubber. And so I'd go out and fix it myself. And I decided about 5 years ago, I'm not doing that anymore. We got people for that, and I'm not it. So
You mentioned at one point too softball in big picture. If they're to be in a position to host a NAC tournament, maybe a regional, lights would be a necessity. Lights, a dome at one point was talked about. Is that stuff still on the table? Obviously, there's more hoops you have to jump through for that to become a reality. But is that stuff still on the table? Is something in the big picture down the road Concordia would love to see and have?
So you asked two different questions. Lights on the softball field, yes. We would like to light the soccer field, the football field, and the softball stadium. That's going to be a fund availability issue, right? When funds become available, we would go to the city and seek permission to do so. It's in our wheelhouse of interest, okay? The dome that was originally discussed about being put over the softball stadium, I think that ship has sailed. No one's interested in that. Now, the bubble over the football stadium is something that we would still consider. I think there's a market for it in northern Ozaukee County, northern Milwaukee County. But there's only probably room for one. Whoever gets to market first is going to be able to create revenue and make a profit. Not that we're necessarily into that. We're not doing it as a business entity. Now, would we rent it out and take some of the revenue to help offset the cost? Absolutely. But so yes, we're still interested. Is it still on the table? Yes. I mean, we have an approval from the city to do so. It's just a matter, again, fund availability and fund. It's going to be a fund dependent thing.
With the turf for the football stadium, anything else on the athletic agenda during this offseason? Any big projects coming up during this offseason?
The turf thing is the next big construction project. I've got some fundraising things I want to do. We addressed the men's varsity locker room area, the Catalyst men's locker room area. I want to do the same thing on the women's side, and bring those up to what we have on the men's side right now. For many, many years, the women's locker rooms were head and shoulders above what we were dealing with on the men's side. Well, now we got to bring the women back up. So I think that's something. It won't get done this summer, but from a fundraising standpoint, in my mind, on my radar screen, that's probably the next project that I'll look to internalize as athletic director and fundraiser, is to address those things. The institution, again, the football field, we have to address the soccer field, and then the softball turf's been out there 15 years too. Or the soccer field, we're gonna have to we'll have to do that too. So you're looking at over a period of the next few years. That's where we're at, and then we'll be fine for a while, and then we'll have to address baseball. The cycle, repeats.
And of course, before we get to the off season, Concordia in a hosting position with as they do annually, the NAC tennis tournament coming up in Kohler this weekend, but then also the baseball tournament at Capco Park in just over a week's time. Does it get easier year by year now? It's almost like riding a bike, hosting those events, because Concordia has been the host for those two sports for a number of years now.
It's easy on our end. Mother Nature, from on the
Sure.
baseball side, you just don't know what you're going to get. But the tennis thing is so much. It's a one-person show, pretty much. I mean, we have an athletic trainer and me, and it's been that way for a long, long time. And Steve Schauer went with me a couple of times to the tennis tournament, but the tennis tournament has evolved into something that's much more manageable today and much more appealing for me to cover and administrate than it was. Not that I don't like tennis, but there used to be in the tennis tournament 130, 40, 50 matches that you'd play over a weekend. And it was long and arduous, and it was long. And then we tried to change it, but all that did was save you 30 matches or whatever. Now it's just 2 dual matches that you're there to preside over. So it's a one-day event, and I think this format it mirrors what the NCAA does. So it prepares the kids to go to NCAA regionals and compete that way. So on the tennis side of it, that's really simple. The baseball thing's simple. You got the weather issue, but we have a large enough staff, and everybody pitches in. It's an all hands on deck thing. We have enough people to throw at it. So yeah, it's like riding a bike. We've done it. Can we always get better? Do we make mistakes? Absolutely. The biggest concern right now is, do we sell bratwurst or not? And I think we've erred on not. We're just going to do hot dogs, baseball and hot dogs, right? And tough decision, but
that is tough.
Tough decision, but I think we're just going to go with the hot dogs.
Speaking of baseball, Capco Park, is that a year-by-year thing? Is Capco Park big picture down the road? Is that going to be the site? Is that debated every year? How do you go about bidding to host the NAC tournament?
So the NAC conference does like tournament hosting bids, and they're every 2 years. So once you get one, you have it for 2 years. Now the tennis thing is a little different. I'm the tennis chair or liaison. Liaison. So I'm the tennis liaison and have been forever. So the tennis tournament has moved around to various places. Some of that's about facility availability, and some of it is our preference of where we want to host it. So this year it'll be up at the Sports Corps in Kohler. The baseball thing, once we built Capco, it just made sense. In a lot of ways, it was commonsensical to have the tournament there because it's weatherproof in a way. As long as you don't lose the mound, you can play baseball.
Yeah.
So a little light rain's not going to cause any problems. It's not going to turn it into soup. If it rains overnight and you get the turf on the mound, you're not going to get rained out. So it just makes sense. Now, having said that, MSOE is partnered with Nicolet, and MSOE has a turf stadium. So now maybe they want to host it in the future. Aurora had plans to build a new turf baseball. So as the technology and the turf technology have changed, I think the sites will start to move. And I'm okay with that. It's great to be the host of it, but it's also in the middle of turkey hunting season. So if somebody else wants to do it, go ahead, man.
A few more questions. I'll let you get going. I know we talked last time we were on the show. Dr. Ferry was on his way out. Interim president right now at Concordia University. Does athletics play any role in the search for the next president? Directly or indirectly?
Probably no.
Okay.
Not really. Are we going to be impacted by it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every facet of the institution will be, so we're not impervious to that, right? But because of Dr. Ferry's affinity for athletics, it's a little unsettling for us to not know what the future looks like, right? I mean, because, for example, we use our athletic expectations of being among the top 3 in every sport in every conference every year, right? Well, that was Dr. Ferry's expectation, okay? Shared by me, but it was his expectation. So what's the new president's expectation going to be? Could be the same, could be more, could be less. We don't know. And so there's a little trepidation about what that looks like, but the powers that be will do a great job, and they'll pick the right leader for this institution and for us, and we'll pick up the pieces and move on with whatever that is. Do we have a role in the search? No. I mean, are they going to say, Rob, what do you think? No, they're not going to do that. So, we're going to be blessed with whoever the new leader is and have to work with that person. And we'll see where it takes us.
Something I want to bring up too, and not to get all emotional here, but we did lose a good guy in Dan Harris a couple of weeks back. He used to be the men's soccer coach here at Concordia. Most recently, the athletic director at MSOE, a colleague of yours, athletic Hall of Famer here at Concordia University, Wisconsin. He's meant a lot not only to this university, but just sports here in Southeast Wisconsin.
Dan meant a lot to me. A lot of people don't realize that, but early on when I got this job, I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. I think I thought I knew what I was going to do, but I was smart enough to know I didn't really know. And Dan was important because any question that I had, I could call Dan. And Dan availed himself to me. So when we started hockey, one of the reasons we started hockey was because of Dan Harris. That relationship and, my ponderings of what would hockey look like, I met with Dan. That was the first, and Dan met me here. We actually had the conversation in the cafeteria. We went to lunch, and we sat in the cafeteria, and we talked about what hockey would look like at Concordia. And then over time, whenever there were issues with anything, Dan was always there for me, always answered any questions that I had. So the sports world lost a great ambassador and a great person. If I could only be remembered when it's my time as fondly as Dan is going to be remembered, or half as much, I think I would have had a successful life.
It was so odd to have a Concordia MSOE game here last week and no Dan Harris.
No Dan Harris
at Fitting Field, but our thoughts and prayers, condolences to the
family.
Harris
Absolutely.
family. Wrapping up on a high though, and typically when I have a guest or a coach on, I always ask, what's the best part about the job? What's the most difficult part of the job? So as an athletic director, you've been here since spring of 2001. What's your favorite part or best part about this position? What's the most difficult part of this position?
The best part's when we winning, having success, seeing the kids, the look on their faces, seeing the fans, the pride that comes with winning and being successful, knowing how hard the coaches work and that being paid off for them. So that's the easy part, right? That's easy. The hard part is ironically the part that I probably enjoy the most. It's, my job is putting out fires. No one brings solutions to my office. They just lob hand grenades in there, right? And then I got to figure out how to get this done before it blows up and kills us all. Right? And so but that's the part I enjoy the most is dealing with the day-to-day fires that crop up that I've got to put out. That I like that because it's never the same thing. I call it mini challenges, M-I-N-I. Well, some days it's M-A-N-Y and M-I-N-I. So there are many challenges, many fires that I've got to put out, and then you go to the next one, and like this list of things. These are all fires that I've got to put out, and I like that about it.
Didn't you call yourself Smokey the Bear at one point?
That's what it is. It's Smokey the Bear. I just chase around putting out fires, and that's but that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the challenge of it's never the same day twice. Unlike the COVID thing, which was just all COVID all the time.
All the time.
Right? I mean, the conversation changed, but it was like, really? That bored me. And so I'm glad that that's beyond, whatever. But so that's probably the hardest thing. And we have 30 sports. So it's 30 head coaches, all with blinders on. They all think that their thing is the most important thing, and that's what you want them to think. And they, they're environmentally aware, but that's not their job. Their job is to focus on their thing, and my job is to focus on all 30 things. Plus. And so that's what I enjoy about it is being able to help in some way. I don't micromanage. I don't get in, I don't play in people's sandboxes really, but to be a part of solving everyone's issues, and when they run in there with their problem, that's if we don't solve this right now, the world is going to end. And as soon as they leave, the next guy comes in, and the world's going to end. And so the world can end a lot in any given day, and my job is to keep the world spinning, right? And I like that part of it.
To wrap things up, anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just happy we're all here, right? I'm happy that we got to play. I'm happy that we've come through the pandemic as well as we have. I'm excited for, this weekend and next weekend. I think we got great chances in softball. We got great chances in tennis. Knock on wood. Hopefully we're in the baseball tournament and we, maybe we'll peak at the right time there. And I'm looking forward to, last summer and spring, mostly summer was a little nerve rattling because the construction was being done in the weight room or the locker room, and well, at a place like this, that I did it, right? So I designed it. I picked everything out, everything. So if it goes bad, it's just me. I can't blame anybody. And so the construction on the turf thing will be a lot easier because I don't have. I mean, we picked it out. The biggest decision I made was what color it was going to be, which was contentious because the football staff wanted some bizarre think Boise State-ish. They wanted some bizarre things. There's a team in Missouri that's got red and gray alternating turf, and then out west, Eastern Washington has red, and Greg kept sending me photos of what, and I'm like, look, as long as it's going to be green, right? Call me old, call me a traditionalist. It's going to be green because that's what it's supposed to look like, is grass, right? So I'm looking forward to that this summer, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the weather changing.
Yeah, it'd
right?
be nice.
I mean, that'd be nice. My golf clubs are in my truck, and I have spent the last 2 weekends at the golf course. However, I've yet to swing a club. Okay, I got a 15-year-old that has his buddies that now are into golf, and so basically all I'm doing is running a shuttle service back and forth and watching them play a little bit. This past weekend was shuttling there, then realizing, I've lost my putter. So, right, all of a sudden my responsibility is his putter, and everyone's convinced it was lost in my truck, which it isn't. Okay, that's not really a thing. Did you check the pro? He doesn't know. He's 15. He doesn't know.
Sure.
But of course, he found his putter, and everything's right with the world. And,
jeez.
But yeah, I'm hoping to play a little golf. And my wife and I were talking about vacation. I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to go fishing with my dad. Go down the ocean, do some fishing. That'd be fun. Got some donor things I'm doing with some people this summer that are always important and always a lot of fun. So yeah,
fantastic, Dr. Barnell. As always, I appreciate your time.
Man, I appreciate you. You know that.
I know you got to go put up more fires, but appreciate everything. And thanks as well behind the scenes to Jeremy Crawford, Josh Dinkelman, Clara Chambers. Thank you for watching all year long. That's it for this year. Thanks for joining us all school year long for Falcon Focus.